Monica,
Hello, good morning.
you're from North Carolina. I didn't know that.
I am.
How was it growing up as a young girl in North Carolina?
It was beautiful and
Mhm.
peaceful. And I was lucky. My mother was originally from Boston.
Oh,
So
was she?
I was raised with a northern accent in the South, which I've since shed. And so it gave me an interesting perspective. I was sort of from both places in some way because she was so Bostonian and we were
Yes.
so in North Carolina. It
She
was
had moved to North Carolina?
we had what?
She had moved to North Carolina?
She did. So that was an interesting thing, being sort of with someone who wasn't from here. We sort of learned it together, I guess you could say. But it was a lovely, lovely state. So
Yes.
I enjoyed it quite.
You
I
have
can't
good
think
you
of a
have
much
good
nicer place
memories.
to grow up.
You
So
have good memories from North Carolina.
I do. And I did my undergraduate work at Chapel Hill. So I was there basically through my undergraduate work. And then after that, I took off and have been here, there, and everywhere. So mostly in New York. I think
Were you
I think on
were
18 years I was in New York.
were either of your parents into arts, or are
My,
they?
my mother was into. She had books. I was a big book child because we lived in a very small town, Mount Airy, North Carolina, which did not have a burgeoning cultural scene. One can imagine. It was rather small town, but I say I was raised on books because from a very young age I was a voracious reader. My mother would encourage it. She would sometimes just let me go to the library and drop me off for hours, and I would just spend hours upon hours.
It's
And the
wonderful
people
when
at the
kids
library
get
knew
the
me
book.
in town.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was so she had books on art history, a lot of French. My mother loved French things. She
Really?
had taught herself to speak French.
Really?
She loved the Impressionists and sort of the post-Impressionists. So that was what I was sort of raised in. And we would go, like she would make sure every year we'd go see the ballet in the closest city, Winston, which had a larger cultural scene.
Yes.
So I was raised in the arts, but not in the way that some people would directly. It was more of a kind of diffused way, but I'm always
In
great.
an inferred way.
Exactly. But yeah,
Yeah.
her passion for it, I definitely
Oh, she was
think I took
passionate
her
about
passion.
arts then.
I'm sorry.
She was passionate about art.
She was passionate about many. I think about beauty. About she loved ballet and art and just. I think she too had grown up in a very. Her childhood had been the opposite. It had been in kind of urban Boston,
Yes.
in a family that was a little challenging in some ways. Very large Catholic family, and she had sort of, I think, sometimes sought to sort of escape some of the challenges of her childhood through going to the art museum or through books and things like that. And that's what she really, I
Well,
think,
Boston is a cultural hub.
it's yeah. Boston was a yeah. I love Boston. I love that city.
Yeah.
I haven't been there I haven't been anywhere in ages, but I certainly haven't been to
I
Boston.
remember Boylston Street. I lived on Boylston Street for 6 months, a
Oh,
long
you
time
did?
ago. Yes,
Oh, wow.
a
Only
long
for
time
six
ago.
months. Yeah.
I worked for Gillette, if you
Oh,
can believe
nice.
it. But yeah, it's an old story.
Huh.
But now you're in the Northeast. It's a totally different culture, especially New York City, of course. How old were you when you got here?
I came to New York City. I interned. I did my master's in art history at Washington University in St. Louis, which is an excellent program. Lovely, lovely people. And I did an internship with Pace a year
Yes.
in. So in between my 2 years of my master's, I interned with Pace. I bugged their HR person to give me one of the few paid internships they had. I needed it paid because I was paying my own way, obviously.
Yes.
And I think I called her like weekly for for months. I was
You got
determined.
the message.
Yeah, we're still friends. I think she forgave me for bothering her for so long. But I interned with them and ended up going back, and I was there for 10 years.
Well, Pace is a wonderful art institution, so to speak. It's really,
Mhm. Well, Arnie created some, well, Arnie actually started it in Boston. A lot of people don't realize that, but that's where he originally opened. And then he ended up coming down to New York. I get the scene was getting very hot at
yeah,
that.
the whole operation moved to Chelsea.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, they still, yeah, they've really diversified across. But I think I always admired about his program from the beginning. You look at Arnie's history, and he was working with artists like Louise Nevelson, Agnes Martin, when no one knew who they were, no one cared who they were, no one would spend that much money on their work.
Yes.
You could get it for hundreds of dollars, and now it's millions. And I think that level of connecting and believing in artists that's really what I took out of that experience at Pace. There were elements of the blue chip world that I found a little more difficult. I think it's become a bit of a closed space to a lot of people who don't feel welcome in it. It's if you're not sort of bleeding money, you don't necessarily feel welcome in those spaces. And
Blue
that's
blood. Yeah.
so I feel like for me, I'm trying to take the best of that world, but make it a lot more approachable, because I think me being an outsider, to some extent, I think I've always felt like an outsider in the art world because I did grow up in a very small southern town. I didn't have parents who were art collectors. I sort of came to it in a roundabout way. So I think that's why I tend to always like artists who are a little bit on the periphery, maybe not so known. My first show was an artist no one in New York had ever heard of,
Who was that?
April Martin. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some people in New York probably had heard of her, but she certainly wasn't like a known presence. She had been in a group show affiliated with her master's studies up in New York, but she'd never really gained a voice there. So, and I think I chose someone, she wasn't from New York at the time. She was finishing up her master's in Tennessee and living between there and North Carolina. So I chose someone somewhat purposefully who no one would really know. And I think that's
Would not
an
be a
important
household
thing.
name. What were you doing at Pace after the internship?
Oh, I did everything at Pace. I literally did. I started as the assistant registrar, so I know all about conservation. I moved my way registrarly. That was so helpful because I know cataloging, conservation, how to keep your work for your later catalog raisonné if you're an
That's
archive.
very specialized knowledge.
It is. And I did that for a while. Then I ended up going to be a dealer's assistant. And then I ended up becoming, they had gotten so big, they established a department for basically exhibitions. I was their director of exhibitions. And
That's a
basically, they were
very
such a
prestigious
large
job.
organization. There were so many different people working on the shows. They needed sort of a central figure to keep it all going and to have 20 people not ask the artist the same question 20 times a day. So that way, someone sort of was this, someone who was sort of who compiled the information that everyone needed from the artist and made sure everyone was organized. And it helped a lot. I think that at that point they were programming, were we 3 or 4 spaces in New York City. It just really helped kind of keep internal communications and artist communications. And I think the artists loved it. So that was a lot of my artist focus that I have now came from that experience, because a lot of what I was doing was geared toward making the exhibition process seamless and pleasant for the artists so their vision could come through without too much chaos. So
And that must be a very trusted position.
they called me the senator because a lot of times I had to keep some internal peace as well.
Yes.
There are sometimes personalities who don't agree on certain creative aspects of
Right.
shows and exhibitions, and it was sort of just keeping true to the artist's vision, keeping on budget, which, even the big galleries, we all think that they're just,
Last but not least.
yeah. So it was I learned a ton doing
Usually when you learn that many skills in one place, it's usually a small operation, but Pace is not that small. Or how big was it at the time?
A little, I think mostly a little over 100, 120, I think was where they vacillated between when I was there. And it sort of kept growing. I don't know what they're at now, but I think they were our little, say, in the range of just over 100 people. And that was just within, not counting Pace McGill and Pace Prince. That was sort of just.
Yes, yes. I'm mostly familiar with Pace McGill, of course, because, you know, as a photographer, that's where I used to go mostly.
Oh, and Peter's wonderful.
Yeah. And, you know, 57th Street, it was wonderful because across the street, there was 3 or 4 photo galleries, and then I'd come across and go to Pace McGill, and that was another photo gallery. It was great, and they're all gone except for Howard Greenberg.
That's why I like that I'm working with photographers.
Yeah.
I love that there are gallery programs devoted to it.
So were you linked to Pace McGill at the time? What did you?
Pace is linked to them. They're.
I mean, were you responsible to Pace McGill for the same kind of task?
Oh, no.
It was
They
separate.
had their own organizational structures. We would sometimes collaborate with them on certain shows if it was. There were artists who were being shown by both sort of at the same, but it was more collaboratively than directly.
Yes.
Each organization really has its own structure, but they collaborate and they have a kind of a more of a umbrella kind of concept.
So what happened after that? Did Casman happen after that?
No, well, oh Lord, we're going back away. You're making me remember my past here. This is crazy. Actually, for a spell, I went to help Joel Shapiro organize his studio and work on his catalog raisonné. He convinced me to come over. I needed something different. I was 10 years in a blue chip gallery can wear you out, and my job was immensely insane. So I decided I wanted a different challenge. So I went and worked for him. That was amazing. At that time, I remember one of the highlights was we put on he was the host. His studio is gorgeous. He has this amazing space in Long Island City. And he was the host for the Foundation for Contemporary Art. Jasper Johns Foundation had their gala there. And there was this massive, was it like 400 people gala? So that was one of the things I helped.
Huge.
I helped the foundation put that on. That was one of the highlights of my entire art career, probably. It was amazing.
I can imagine.
Yeah, so I did that for a while, and then I ended up missing the gallery world. As much as I love Joel and doing that, I think I was used to so many balls in the air that when I was that focused, I had sort of trained myself to do all the balls in the air.
It's a different mindset.
It's a different mindset, and as much as I loved it, and I think it was good for me to have that moment of kind of focus, I missed. So I ended up going back to Casman. So yeah.
How was it there?
Casman, well, it was funny. It's a different program because Paul was such a dynamic person, and the artists he worked with. That's the interesting thing is when you deal with different galleries, the artists always seem to reflect sort of the spirit and the presence and the vibe of the gallerist, because obviously they're the one bringing them in. And he had such an interesting array of artists who he had worked with at that point and over the years. So it's always nice because I got to meet and work on a show with Walton Ford, who's brilliant. And it was just a different roster of artists. So for me, each time I've worked with an artist, I've learned something because they all function.
Yes.
They're all in the art world, but they all function completely differently. What they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it. So each one, I think I've taken something from every show I've ever worked on.
But you're very lucky in that you worked for the cream of the crop, so to speak, in the art world. I mean, you worked for Pace and Casman; those are major names in the industry.
I think it's mainly I look at the artists who I've worked with, and I'm honored that I've worked with the people.
Yes, of course.
Because they're just some of the most brilliant people and the things they've given to me and being able to work with them. And that's where I tell people I don't mind that I'm getting older, because I have this sort of built up knowledge from all of this behind me. And I think it was why I needed to go do something on my own. I think that's what led me to eventually do that, because I felt I needed to take all of these things I'd learned, but also make it, maybe it's because I'm Southern, I'm a very warm, you know this because you would come in and chat with us. I'm very warm. Like when I started the gallery, I don't like the idea of like the reception desk with the person hiding behind it. And you only see their eyeballs, and
You
yeah,
always wonder what
don't
they're
say
doing.
hi to you, even though you're right there. They just don't. You know, and I actually know programs where people were told not to say hi to people. So not all of them, but there are some. And I'm very, again, welcome to my home. If you're in my gallery, you're
They're
in my,
very engaging, yes.
yeah. And so I wanted to do it in a way where people felt comfortable coming in, even if they didn't plan on acquiring a piece, because they would.
But you did go back to North Carolina for 2.5 years.
I did. I took
What happened? What was that about?
I'm a friend of mine knew a wonderful woman named Chandra Johnson, who had opened a program in my home state, and she was doing a very what I would call sort of a very serious New York caliber program. And Charlotte's a very cultural market, has a wonderful cultural scene.
Yes, it is.
Was the second largest
It
banking.
was a world class type of operation.
Yeah, it's excellent. So she was doing this and was looking for an inaugural director. And I went and did that for a while because I thought it would be a challenge. At this point, I think as I was getting older, I was wanting to do things I hadn't done before and to try to challenge myself. I'm just someone who doesn't like to just get comfortable. And I was looking, and in my private life, I'd recently gone through a divorce, so a change of scenery was something that felt, sometimes when you go through these things in your life, you sort of I'd been with someone for 19 years and now I wasn't, so it was like a change of scenery might be like refreshing. So all of these things sort of, and I think when you're in those spaces, the universe gives you weird opportunities to do things, and I think the universe sort of brought that for me to do that and to cleanse. So I went down there. It was a wonderful opportunity, brought in a few artists who I'd worked with before, like
So you brought artists to the gallery.
yeah, I brought Elliot Puckett, did a show down there.
And the name of the gallery was what? What was the name? What was the name of the gallery?
SOCO. It's still there.
Yes.
Yeah. I think they're actually doing the Armory show this fall in the city, so you'll be able to see them. So yeah, it's a wonderful program.
So bringing artists into the gallery, in your gallery, people you worked with, whom you admire and who enjoyed working with you, that must be a very special type of experience to be able to do that and bring them in and
yeah, and I met some new artists I didn't know who they were working with, so there's always that nice infusion of both.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was nice to see how I'd been in the North so long at that point. It was nice to see how art was received in the South, and kind of to kind of see where those differences lie. And there's some really good collectors there, and it was a wonderful experience. But
I meant to ask you, are collectors different in the South than they are in the Northeast, in the New York and Boston area?
I think all collectors are very individual, and I think where you are lends itself to that individuality. I sometimes feel like, and I can say this because I'm Southern, I feel like I don't know, I think sometimes, I think we all just come with it. A lot of it is being willing to be your own individual self. And sometimes I think collectors in the Northeast have been so used to just being such fierce like to live in New York City, you have to be a fierce individual or you will just, this. And
Yes.
sometimes in the South, you don't really have that. So it's drawing that individuality out of people, which I think is very inherent in New York because it's a city of people that just, that's what they do. And that's why I think it's a little, it's a little different, maybe a more kind of slow, thoughtful kind of coming together of ideas down there, and just introducing people to different things. And a lot of the people there travel extensively. They see work at Basel, they see work in New York, but it was nice to bring it to their doorstep where they weren't having to go to it or to go to an art fair. They were able to walk out and go down the street or get in their car and
which is really a big thing. It's really important to have that kind of a resource.
Well, especially you think of now with COVID and the lack of people traveling in the last year and a half.
Yeah.
If you don't have that locally, it's, you know, and that's one of the things I think I'm trying to respond to now is sometimes we need to make sure there's art where people.
We were very lucky in New York in that the museums remained open a good part of the time. I mean, I've spent a lot of time at MoMA and the Met, and
they were far less crowded.
And they're far less crowded.
And now you're spoiled. When it goes back to capacity, you're going to be like, get these people out of here. I want my wing back.
Yeah. So tell me something. Having worked at Pace and Casman, that must, how much of that shapes your current practice? What did you keep from it, and what did you leave behind because it just doesn't apply to you, because you didn't agree with it in the first place? What's left of all that for you that you can put into practice now with what's going on for you?
I think probably the strongest thing I took from both was the importance of letting an artist do the show they need to do. And it's whatever it takes to make that happen, to raise the money to make that happen, the creative liberty, the not being so focused only on will everything be easy to sell, but actually letting them produce a show that is true to their vision and is allowed to be sort of historically important. And I think that's something that I'm fiercely behind. And then I'd say the other thing is what I mentioned earlier about Arnie, and that's the idea of believing in an artist in a way where, you know, maybe their first show with you, you only sell a piece or two, you don't sell the walls off or the whatever the work is attached to, but believing in them that the next and the next, and kind of taking that path to actually believe in a creative personality long term. And I think that investment in artists is something big that I took. I think what I left behind was, I think I do come from a very cognitive place of wanting different voices, be they, you know, female voices, artists of people of color, LGBTQ, artists from different regions. I don't want only artists from New York City. I think that's too closed a vision. I have artists from the South, from Mexico, from LA, from New York, and each of them has a different vantage point because they're not all in the same city doing the same thing, and they're not the same person. So having a very diverse roster, not even because it's politically popular to do. I've always wanted that. I've always done that. I think it's important because otherwise you just won't be it's like the world. If the world was only one voice, it would be so boring.
But it also keeps you interested, I imagine, because of
the variety. And again, I learn from every show I do. I learn something about myself. I learn something about the world. I learn something. Maybe I have to deal with things that are uncomfortable that I haven't had to deal with. I have to look at things I haven't seen or somehow was not realizing I wasn't seeing. And I think that's the power of art, is sometimes it makes us.
So it's the discovery that's interesting. Yeah.
And that's what you're giving to the people who come as well, but people don't realize you're getting it yourself. And I think if you start kind of just letting people have that voice and not making it like, oh, I only want a show of this size painting and of these colors and this will sell. And it's like, no, it's like, let the artists do, they go to their studio every day to try to move their thoughts forward, their ideas.
They must love you for that.
Well, I hope so. I try to be, I'm definitely I feel like I'm an artist dealer. Our motto has long been for the artist, for the art. And I say "our" because my director, Jenny, has been, has been integral in this. And she shares that same vision. And she's been with me from the beginning. And that whenever we're in a pinch or we're having a crazy week, or like the last year and a half has been sort of nuts, we just remind ourselves of that vision, that we are for the artist.
Are you there?
And that's all we need.
So which makes me think of another topic, like every so often the art world gets caught up in some new trend or attitude, some kind of dominant theme. And if the work doesn't, if you
Does
don't
it really? You don't say.
that you're familiar with that, right?
I've heard that. Yeah, I've noticed that a little bit. Yeah. Well, I think it's everything has a moment. I see it a lot like fashion.
Yeah.
That when these trends come along and these things come along, we can take the good in them, but keep our own style footprint. Like if we become a slave to every fashion that comes through, we would all look rather ridiculous and have no individuality. We would just, so I'm always I'm open to these things. And like, what does this have that it could add an interesting layer? What does this, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it pushes everything else away. I think it just becomes another layer in the conversation.
Yeah.
Kind of like
you look into it.
You what?
You do look into it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like when the NFT thing started coming out, I was on the phone with every artist I knew who was doing them, with people in the industry involved with them. I'm trying to learn what they are because I didn't understand them very well. Yes. I don't think a lot of people didn't. And so it's important just to understand it, because there could be layers in it that, become of prominence and importance and help us see different things. Do I think it's going to completely change everything? No. I think it will become a layer like everything else. Kind of like art fairs didn't, there was all this talk of our art fair is going to destroy this or this or this. It all everything balances over time. We just have to sort of, because people have enough independent thought that we're not sheep. We don't just get led by.
Yeah. The reality, I think, is that what's fundamental remains, and the rest is just wavelets on the ocean that come and pass and go. But and
it may mark that point in time in some way, but it may not be as drastic as we sometimes like to. We're very dramatic, I think, in our presentation of what's happening in the world. It's how we make sense of the world, but sometimes we're overly, I think, dramatic in that everything is this cause and effect that's of such drastic nature.
Yes.
If you get caught up in that, you'll lose your mind. Yeah.
Of course, that I'm a fine art photographer, so
a very good one.
Thank you.
Once I actually have art in this house, which will be next week, you'll be here, so in the collection.
So I'm going to quote Howard of the Howard Greenberg Gallery, who once said, and I paraphrase, of course, that he says that we have lost the sense of the photograph as an object, as something beautiful that we can hold in our hands and admire and enjoy as an object of beauty. Does that ring a bell for other areas of art? Because I see it in photography.
Is the thinking behind that because photography and Instagram and images have become so ubiquitous with everyone snapping images of everything constantly all day long that it's no longer seen. We no longer treasure the object because we're so inundated with them everywhere. Is that what you think that's leaning towards?
I think the area where I see it is where photographers as artists want to be different, and they want to do something different, and in the process they forgot, what the fundamentals are, and all of a sudden it's no longer photography, it's something else. But
yeah, they're trying to take it out of the realm of photography. And I wonder if part of that isn't because they feel photography has become so inundated with everyone.
I think it's because the industry, because gallerists and curators are pushing them to do things to be different. Because if you want to distinguish yourself, you have to do something different. And so they come up with all these things.
But I think, like, say what you do in your work is different.
Yes.
You layer reflections and you create abstractions out of the world around us, because obviously the world is full of abstractions, but you sort of find them, isolate them, perhaps manipulate them through things that produce reflection, or like there's ways that you do it. I mean, at this point it's probably so second nature to you. I don't even know that you think about doing it. I think you just do it. Yeah. So to me, that is, you're taking and sort of objectifying the world around you and creating these objects that, yes, I could say, oh, this photo was taken, this image was taken here. But at that moment, I probably couldn't recreate what you saw because it was a certain time of day, the way the light was, the woman who was walking with the dog, like you could not make that moment happen again unless you literally tried to recreate it, which would be like a performance.
Yes, but, exactly. So
I think, I don't know. I think we also, gallerists are, the object is challenged also because I think we're going to see that increasingly, I think, in the coming years, because a lot of younger collectors, a lot of the new generation, they're not as object driven as perhaps your generation, my generation. I think they're more experience driven, because you and I did not grow up on tablets and phones and computers. They came to me sort of when I was kind of getting, toward my more adult years, like, young adult. And then, but whereas the generations that we're starting in now, they've never lived without it. And I think that we have to be cognizant that is going to change, when what I see on my phone as object is very different than object. And I think there's this general philosophical truth that the way that generation is going to see things is not going to be the same as we did. Now, granted, I don't think you'll have people where their whole, their homes, their museums will just be full of digital things. I don't think it will go there, but I do think the object is transforming. And I think there will always, like you said, there will be things that always last, but I think they'll be infused with other layers of things that expand, say, the media that artists can work with, these experiential ideas. Perhaps that even comes into the concept of painting and the more traditional media. I don't know what it looks like, but I think that's what you're seeing. You're sort of seeing that right now with the NFT art thing, where people are sort of saying there's painting and sculpture and photography, and then there's this whole NFT thing. And those are like, but there's layers between those where they, in some way, some of the things NFTs are doing aren't that different than what you're doing and how you're manipulating.
Yeah, it's a different way of doing it.
Manipulating it through a different means. Yeah. You're using a different instrument. And so I think it's trying to find those ways where they all add value is more, but I think to say, I mean, it's kind of like people saying, oh, painting was dead for a while, and it was nothing.
I remember that.
Dies. It just, we all just say we're tired of, and a lot of it is we overexpose ourselves. We're so obsessed with it for a time that then we want it to die because we've overdone it. Whereas maybe if we would all let multiple, and that's why everyone at the beginning when I was opening the space was like, in the program, they're like, well, so what are you going to focus on? What's your focus? And I was like, artists who are really passionate. That's my focus. And that's what you get. And it's that's why I have performance art, photography, painting, sculpture, things that can't even really be described probably, and I do that because I don't want to get sick of like, I only do painting. I would get so bored with that after a while, I would just be like, I feel like I would miss, I see how the artists engage with each other and the painters learn from the sculptors and the performance artists, and the feedback loop gets really powerful.
Yeah, because that's you're basically a curious person, and curiosity is not that evenly distributed. Curiosity is a very special quality and it drives a lot of what you do and say.
Yeah, and it doesn't kill the cat.
No, it doesn't kill the cat.
I don't know where that saying came from. It's horrible.
So September 6th, 2019 was a big day for you.
Yes, and I had about a week or so to get ready for it because my landlord at my space hadn't gotten the space ready in time. That was the quickest I'd ever put a show together. It was really crazy, but it turned out being, and it was pouring rain. I remember right before we were going to open, it was literally, it looked like just a deluge outside.
For our listeners, I have to specify that September 6th, 2019 is when you opened your eponymous gallery on Miss Bernard Street.
That was a funny
downtown.
I didn't think anyone would come when it was pouring rain, but it ended up really, really fun and I was pleased with who came. And
so tell me something. What were you saying by opening that gallery? What were you expressing that was deeply personal to you? You were making a statement by opening that gallery. What was that?
I think for me, it was just being willing. It was a time when a lot of galleries were closing. And I remember I was very moved that someone I admire greatly in the art world, Adam Weinberg with the Whitney, actually came to the opening. And he actually came up and he said, Mike, I want to thank you for opening this gallery because it's very brave. And I think it was a moment where a lot of galleries that were kind of emerging to mid-career, mid-size, small to mid-size, were not doing well because it's difficult. And to me, it was more just something I had to do. I don't think I was trying to prove, I'm still not trying to prove anything to anyone.
But who did you owe it to when you say I had to do it? Who did you owe it to? To them, to yourself?
I think I think I just had to do it. It's like breathing. It's like the way.
You're not sure what, but you had to do it.
I think it was the next step in feeding this crazy thing I have with art in my life. It was the next, and I think I had always wanted to be able to say, I want to show these artists and I want to believe in these people, and I don't want to have to sell it to other people. I want to do it because I believe in it. And these were people who were kind of in my life. Like I encountered April's work and been immensely moved by it. So I really wanted to show her just because I think it could change people's the way they see their world. So a lot of it is, to be honest, it wasn't like, I'm gonna do this and that. It really was just this. It was the next thing to do to help the artists who I respect grow.
And was that your need to share something that moves you with other people? Was that part of it?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. And just in a way that was very, warm and welcoming and open. And, I just wanted to do it and to see, what could come out of that. And it just felt, I think sometimes I'm a very cognizant listener kind of to the universe, and everything was just sort of leading me that way to do that. The people I was meeting, the things I was doing, and it just felt very organic to do it. And I found a beautiful space. It was, I loved it, and I love what we've built. And I think the nicest thing for me is the artists now engage with each other without our even.
Oh, really? That's
like
wonderful.
I'll find out like somebody just did a virtual studio visit with one of the other artists, and they, or they talked on the phone for a while, and I love that. The way I see the program is I want people who are very supportive of each other, not competitive, not, not political, not, combative, not jealous, and just artists who support each other and really like a community. And that's what we've managed to build. And that, I think, makes me more proud than anything. And we've gotten artists placed in, in good collections, and we've done some amazing shows and let people do some really just outstanding installations. So I couldn't ask for anything more than that. So
Yeah, so it was an act of love in a way.
were you there? I can't remember. Did you
No,
come?
no.
You didn't. I didn't meet you until later, but
Oh, yeah,
it was an amazing evening.
no, I wasn't.
It ended up being, and I think a lot of people came in not knowing who I was, and just because they kind of saw what was happening in there, and a lot of people I'd met that first evening who didn't, and then we just, and that's how I wanted to be the type of space where people would want to come in and, hi, Julep, were you saying hi? Julep saying hi. I knew she would say hi. Hush.
You know,
She gonna hush.
I'm a dog lover.
Oh, good. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Julep, are you saying hi? There's Julep.
Ah, look at that.
She's like,
Hello.
hello. And then Jasper is asleep. She's the feisty one. So just like her mom. Feisty? Yeah, she's feisty. Yeah. She's like, I'm tired of sleeping. Let's do something.
So listen, collectors, because we seldom talk about them, they are key participants in this whole thing, in the art market. And some of them are exceedingly knowledgeable. They really know their stuff. But others are not at all. And
it's different levels of passion.
Yeah, their priorities differ and their means differ, which is very important. And then you have the artists, which is a diverse mosaic of individuals, with their own thing. And how do you bring the two of them together into some sort of a symbiotic rapport, collector and artist, or collector and art? And did you sometimes have to separate the art from the artist to make things happen? How do you get to where you want to go with this mix of really diverse qualities in each of them and make it all happen?
I'm probably a fairly huge proponent of having the artist be understood as a human with the art. I have a very humanist way of seeing artists and art and collectors. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing the creative retreat out here in Connecticut, is I think getting artists to sit down with collectors and, just engage and have conversations and start to know each other. The artist can understand, why does this person want to collect? What is their life like? And the person can understand, why does this artist want to be an artist? What is their, what is their passion? What's fueling this? I think there's so much power in that I'm a big believer in having the collectors engage with the artists, meet the artists. I think if you try to separate it as, here's the art object, but you don't really want to know this artist, to me, you like, I'm in my own collection, which has gotten rather crazy. I think there's maybe, is there even one artist who I haven't personally met and sat down with? There's one who I haven't spent a ton of time with, but we've had some phone conversations. But mostly it's people I know and I have engaged with. And to me, that's important because it helps. So I always relate it back to my own way of collecting. And I think that personal connection helps me understand the work better.
So you gather people around you that are similar to you in some way in relation to art.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, definitely. And I just think that's because all artists are giving their entire, it's a big sacrifice to give your life to art. And I think there has to be some respect around that. Most artists could be out making much easier livings, being an attorney, a doctor, a whatnot, a whoever, a marketing person, whatever. We all could. But instead, we do it because, kind of like opening the gallery, we do it because we have to.
Yes.
And I think artists do it because they can't imagine not doing it. Waking up and not doing it would be like a life they don't want. So to me, introducing the collector to that tenacity of their life is so, because then I also like to establish collectors who will continue to support an artist, not just by like, oh, get this because it matches the sofa and get this because it, but actually will see this person as a human who they want to. Maybe I'm old school and I believe in some sort of patronage, like the Medicis. I don't know. Maybe we can get back to that. I don't know. But that's what I like, that idea of encouraging people to follow along with an artist path and not just from a market perspective.
Is there an aspect of mentoring in all this?
I think it can. I think there can be. I think both sides have something to learn from each other. I think that's the thing. I think collectors have as much to learn from artists, and artists have as much to learn from collectors. And I think it's establishing they, even though in some cases they may be very different people, sometimes they may be very similar people. But I think it's that aspect of give and take. And I think every interaction you have with a being intellectually is going to mark you. And I think letting yourself have those experiences is really
very enriching for both.
Yeah. And I think to me, that's what art is about. It's not, oh, I want something to hang on my wall, or I want to go to a museum and look at things installed in a case or on the, I think it's about challenging our intellect, our energy, our passion, and making our lives really valuable, because we all have good days, we all have extremely horrible days. But I think those days that are, like you've probably had those days where you're at a museum or at an artist studio and it's really transformative, and you leave it thinking, this is what life is about.
I go to galleries and museums and I get charged by what I see. Mm-hmm. Whether it's photography or any other form of art, and mostly modern art, is modern art, modernist art. Mm-hmm. It charges my energy. That's all I can say. It charges my batteries.
Yeah, and it makes us question. That's why I say when I first met April Martin, well, and Alexandra Stone was like this too. Oh, and Chris Watts, a lot of the artists in the program. When I first encountered their work, I learned very powerful things, not only about the world they were seeing, but about myself through it. And I think that's an experience you can't.
No, it's priceless.
From anything else. And so to me, collecting isn't so much an exercise in gathering objects. I try to encourage people to see it as gathering sort of knowledge and energy and beauty and understanding of the world and meaning or the lack of meaning, like just gathering all of these different aspects of life and spending time with them. And that with a good collection, to me, that's what you go through someone's collection, and at the end of it you feel this kind of electric understanding of the world, or how they've seen the world. And I love collectors and that's why I always try to encourage everyone to see it as, it's not just an object at a time, it's sort of an experience. It is experiential. And that's what I hope we can get the younger generation to see, that the experience, it's not the object, it's what that energy the object gives you. That's the experience. And if that can't, sometimes I think the market can tamp that down a little bit, and we have to let it, you know, and especially when we go through those phases of these 10 artists are hot and this type of work is hot and everything else is, you know, I think that
That's a whole other conversation in and of
yeah,
itself.
that's where that energy starts to get, you know, so I think it's just it's like life, let it go wild and loose, and there's a ton of ideas out there, and let's hear them.
So Monica, what is the real payoff for you out of all this, and how does it feel when you collect on it? I mean, you know what you want, you got what you wanted out of it, and how does it feel when you know that's going on?
You know, for me, it's just a path, and I think every day it's like, what am I doing? Like today, I'm working on a project for an artist that could be a very good thing for them. So it's all about just a path for me. I don't really feel there's a point where I can say like I have had victory, or you know. And the last year and a half has been challenging because I've had to sort of revamp the whole idea of what I do and respond to a very different world, and try to be more nimble, more fluid, maybe move away from the concept, at least for a while, of being tethered to brick and mortar, and being able to be a brick and mortar that can go to where people are, here, there, everywhere. So I think the payoff is just waking up another day and being able to continue to do what I love.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you have to have something in the morning when you get up that gets you out of bed.
Aside from 2 espressos.
Espressos.
Yeah, 2 espressos and some passion. That's all you know.
In my case, coffee and 2 croissants.
Oh, do you see that? I'm doing it wrong. I should be consulting with you. That sounds better than 2 espressos. I'm doing this whole thing wrong. Yeah, it's, you know, so I think that, you know, the payoff is when one of my artists feels that their work has been able to gain a voice, or they've been able to realize a project they've been wanting to do, or spend more time on a project they've been wanting to do. So I think that the payoff for me is always more that than, I don't know, I think.
So the payoff for you is to see the artists actualize themselves and grow and do things that are really true for them. Right?
Yeah. I think that's the ultimate payoff. And that's, you know, and that's the ultimate payoff, I think, whether you're a collector or a dealer, to be able to let this person birth these ideas and explore them, and really produce work that will transcend all of us, you know, and make a difference in someone we may not even know generations from now.
I have to tell you something that has always touched me deeply. When I go visit a gallery, and the gallerist is either a friend or someone who knows me somewhat and knows that I'm never going to buy anything from them because I'm an artist, and you know, and
your house is full of your own work. You don't need any. I see it all around you right now. It's like you don't have room for anything.
But
you enjoy looking at it.
And then we look at something, and I drool over something, or I say that I really like the work, and that gallerist takes me by the hand and opens drawers and starts showing me more work and showing me books, and they spend time with me, knowing that they're never going to sell anything to me, but it's a measure of their passion.
Well, they're giving you something, a greater understanding of the artist, those are the exchanges.
But that takes passion on their part to do that, is what I'm saying. And that really touches me deeply when I see people who are so dedicated to what they do. The payoff is not selling a print, you know, or a canvas, but just living their job, living their their profession. You know, it's a living thing. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not just a set of movements.
Yeah. Well, and
And
that's
I'm
why I think
always
whenever
struck
I'm
by
gonna,
that.
yeah, and I think it's what you, that's the part I love. And so whenever I'm in the middle of an exhibition we've done or a show or an art fair or booth or whatever it is, I want to be in it. I want to be talking to people. I want to be seeing reactions. I want to be having conversations. That's the part I love.
Yes.
And Jenny and I used to joke that sometimes it made it crazy because we would spend the whole day every day talking to people, then we'd have to go home and actually do work because we hadn't got anything done, you know. And it's true. And but a lot, so much was built during those moments of interaction and engagement that it's worth it. And I think to
But
me,
something always
art
comes
is a
out of it.
conversation.
Yeah.
Art is a conversation. And I think to think that people, you know, and if somebody wants to come in and just look at a show quietly and take it and leave on their own, that's fine too. But I think it's part of a larger conversation. And if someone wants to explore it, that's part of our responsibility to not, you know, if they have a question, to, you know, not push a book at them, but to actually engage and understand where their question is coming from. And, you know, I don't know, that's, to me, that's always been, you know, maybe I don't know if it's my art history background or just the way I grew up. Like you said, I had to grow up being curious because it wasn't so readily accessible. And maybe that's an offshoot from all of those things.
Yeah. But now you've moved beyond the classic gallery practice, right?
Which has actually been amazing. We've been, you know, I think there's something, the world changed back in early 2020, and I think we're going to see it. Certain things will return to maybe what they used to be, but I think we're all a bit changed.
But
And
it's a different iteration of the same thing, really.
yeah, yeah, and I think all we're trying to do is be nimble, where we, you know, maybe at certain times of the year it makes sense to do a show in another location, or maybe if an artist has a big following in another area, it makes sense to go there. You know, maybe to go do something, you know, right now we have an artist, Karis Kennedy, who lives in St. John, and she's installing in some very historical, very fascinating spaces there, and that we're working on that for later this month. It's the ability to not always be in the same white box doing the same thing over, and it just lets us, you know, and we're talking about collaborating with
new
people.
Challenges all the time.
Yeah, new challenges, and it lets us be fluid and whether it's new architectures or new ideas, it's just, and again, this is all, it's very much how I think I've lived my life. It's a work, and, you know, if you ask me what it's going to look like in 2 years, I'm not sure, but it will be a daily, you know, I think what it will look like is something that has the vision. I just follow the vision. That's all I do.
You know, but you said something interesting, and that is the same piece of art does not look the same in two different spaces. So that when you move around and you're hanging the same series of artwork, you cannot look at it quite the same way because the space is
The
not.
UPS man is here.
The critic is back there.
Yeah, I think the UPS man must be here because she's going crazy.
So it's a very challenging and interesting challenge that you're entering.
Yeah, but I love it, and that's why everyone's like, oh, the last year's been so difficult. It's actually, I've learned. I think you learn so much in the times that are challenging, and you know, when everything started going sideways, you know, our first response was I didn't want to just be sitting around waiting to be able to get back into the gallery because we were shut down. So we went and I decided I wanted to have a benefit exhibition, but I didn't know who to give the money to. Like I wanted to give to the frontline people who were helping the city, because this is like when you've lived in a city for almost 18 years or something, like you feel you have to help it. So I started sending emails, and I discovered, you know, Feed the Frontlines, who at the time was just like they weren't a nonprofit, they were burgeoning, just trying, same as us, trying to help. And so I basically emailed them and be like, hey, if I produce a show, can I give you 25% of the profits toward you helping frontline workers? And they're sort of like, who are you? And how did you, Jula, honey, come here, come here, hold on, come here, come here, come here, Jula, Jula, come here. She's like, the UPS man is here. I can't come. She's like, what is going on here? The world is chaotic. But
So
anyway,
there are two components.
here,
There are
hold
two
on one sec. We're gonna
Okay.
do something. Come here. See, only some things, a good bone can solve everything in the world of dogs. If our lives could only be that simple.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was saying that the way I understand it, there are two components to Monica King projects. One component is about the marketing of the work, and doing these fluid exhibits in various places, and the other is about fostering an environment for art development where artists feel comfortable to not just produce art, but to communicate and then with one another and enrich one another. Do I have it right?
Yeah, and I think also with the idea is to have artists be able to come here, not in so much of a structured way as with a traditional residency, like, okay, you come, you apply, and then maybe you get picked and you come and you do, this many weeks and you have to produce this many works. But really to be like, what do you need out of it? Do you want to come? Do you have a family so you can't come for that long? Do you want to come for a long weekend, for a week, for a month, for 2 months? Like, what works for where you're at? Very individualized to what the artist needs. And then when you come, it's also that idea of being able to have collectors who I know love this artist, or critics, or writers, academics, other artists who, and have them come visit as well, and either just spend time in the same space together as two humans learning what each other is about, or collaborating. If it's two, like I have the first two are going to be April Martin and Alexandra Stone are coming to do a collaboration in the fall. That's going to be our kickoff. And they've never really worked together. They love each other's work, but they've never really been in the same space conceiving it together. So a lot of it is just, and we also have musicians. I have some musicians who may come out, maybe chefs. I mean, just different dancers. I'm sort of just like anyone who's creative and needs a minute to breathe. It's beautiful. I'm on 2 acres. It's like forest all over here and forest for miles this way. There's a little, it's at night. There's these amazing owls out here. It's just, there's stars. There's no lights anywhere. So it's just like completely magical. It's that minute of being able to disconnect from your daily, what you're used to, and just get some quiet to think. And I think I needed this with everything that was going on. And it made me realize, and I'm about an hour and a half from the city. I can day trip in. I'm probably going to eventually keep a place in both places now that things are I'm finishing up getting this ready. But I like that it can be that's why I call it a creative retreat. It's sometimes we all need to let our minds rest for a minute.
It's going to be very collaborative.
Yeah, it's that idea of, I'm not going, kind of like the gallery, I'm not going to define what it is, because sometimes we may go beyond that definition. And it may be, sometimes I may have more larger groups out to do things and to experience things, or I may keep it very intimate. But it's just going to be a place that fosters creatives, artists, creativity, and finding peace in it. Because sometimes I think being an artist and being in the art world is very frenetic. It's very demanding. it can be somewhat exhausting if you don't let yourself kind of breathe and remember why you're in it to begin with. So I think
True. That's true.
I kind of see this as a place to let people just breathe for a minute, and that's never a bad thing, I don't think.
So before I forget, I just want to congratulate you about the artist of yours that's having her work exhibited at MoMA. I saw that on
Oh, I was so
Instagram this
thrilled
morning.
for her. She's amazing. You should go see that piece. She's an incredible. I feel we were actually supposed to. We're hoping to show her this fall. Her show had to be rescheduled because of COVID. I had her planned for a year, but it was supposed to be in September of 2020, and things just weren't and she's in LA and didn't feel comfortable coming, and we didn't feel comfortable with her coming. So we're hoping to get our exhibition together with her. And she's amazing. She studied with Charles White. If you don't know her work, you should research her. She's very well known within a certain community, and I think probably more so in LA.
Her name is
Judith Hernandez.
Oh, yes.
Although she was one of the first, I think she was one of the first Chicana artists, maybe the first, if I recall correctly, to actually kind of be shown in New York. She had a show in the early 80s in the city, and was one of the first to sort of bring that Chicana voice from the West Coast to the East Coast, because it's always been a bit more powerful there. But she's brilliant. She's working in like large scale pastels on paper. So it's this very ironic sort of, a lot of times we associate pastels sort of with females or a lesser, but she makes these powerful images. They are just outstanding. And she's engaging a lot of cultural ideas, social ideas, concepts of being a woman in the art culture, a woman in this culture.
But her piece at MoMA is part of what? Where is it located?
It's in the Geffen collection. It's part of a larger, it's part of an exhibition. And that's why I loved seeing her reaction, because she didn't, I think they sort of surprised him. I don't think she knew when they would actually, that's the thing, when you're an artist and you give, when you get a work, when a museum acquires a work, you never really know if they're going to put it in the closet or if they're actually going to engage with it. And I think she's so thrilled that I think it went in 2019, and then obviously the world fell apart.
Yeah.
So for it to come out right now, I think is a beautiful statement on the world. And it's, I haven't seen the entire exhibition so I can't speak to it, but once I do, maybe we'll all come and we'll go together. So there we go. And then we'll go to lunch, because we're vaccinated and we can do these things.
That's right. So
and then we can talk about the exhibition, because I'm not one of those people who will opine on things I don't know, and I don't know enough about this exhibition to speak intelligently about it. But I love that they chose her, and I'm sure it's a powerful show based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I love to see it.
I haven't been to MoMA in a while, so that'd be nice. I used to go all the time, but I'm kind of been going here and there, but it's harder to go everywhere now. I hope that it will get a little easier. It won't be so appointment driven, and but I've been trying to go to places, as kind of like you said, it's been nice to go when places kind of just keep supporting them, and things get a little bit.
Let's do it.
Well, you live near the Met, so you probably go to the Met a lot, right?
Well, I live 3 blocks from the Met.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, so that's like your neighborhood museum.
Right. I mean,
Not bad.
I live along the museum miles. So,
yeah.
But to be honest with you, there are 2 museums that I go to. Essentially, that's the Met, which used to be a very boring place, but no longer. And then MoMA. Those are my 2 main museums. And sometimes
you should go to the Whitney. The Whitney's incredible.
The Whitney can be incredible, and sometimes, but yes, the 3rd one is the Whitney, and it used to be near me, and now it's no longer near me.
They moved. You're
So I
such
have
a
to,
New Yorker. That's not in my neighborhood anymore.
so I,
See, I
so I
used
have to
to,
combine it with a promenade on
I
the.
used to live beside the Whitney, like literally the building beside it for about 2 years. So yeah, so it was like they were my neighbor. So, but New York, and that's the thing, New York, there's such, but that's what I'm also realizing. And I like the idea of being more nomadic because there's amazing museums in San Antonio, in Denver, in there's one in Norfolk, Virginia, the Price. There's amazing museums all over. And I
Yes,
love, and as much as I love New York and I love, Paris and the places we've
but you
associated
have
with
to
it,
know where they are too.
yeah, it's like I love the idea of kind of getting out more and being, and there's so much culture to be found
Yes,
everywhere,
yes, yes.
you
In the
know.
most unexpected places sometimes.
Exactly, exactly. Because there were collectors who had amazing collections, and now it's built in, that's how some of these things began.
Like I've been wanting to go to the Noguchi Museum for years, and it's not that far from here.
It's across the way. You got to go across the East River.
So let's talk about some of your artists. I picked four because we couldn't talk about all of them. And I picked two photographers like me, of course, and then two non-photographers and two males and two females. Fair?
You're so fair.
So Nelson Morales, colorful, elegant, and dynamic images of gay scenes.
Mhm.
Maya Godet, how do you pronounce her name? Godet?
Yes.
And her black and white vintage-like images of intimacy and pain. Andre Gregory,
Mhm.
whom I'll always remember from his film My Dinner with Andre with Wallace Shawn, and making the fashion pages of Vogue at the time. He looked very dashing and elegant in Vogue. And Lauren Ball,
Oh, yes.
was
Brilliant.
brilliant colors float on a background of layered transparencies.
Mhm.
And how did you come to work with these guys, and how do they fit within the gallery's general roster of artists?
Well, I'll start with Andre because he's the easiest. I've known him, gosh, for more years than I can even probably recall. And I met him just actually on a trip once when I was on a holiday, and I met he and his wife, and we all hit it off. And he's a brilliant creative. Obviously, I don't. Have you
How
read
long
it?
ago? How long ago was that?
Oh gosh, that's what I'm trying to remember. Was it 2000? Was it like 2006, 2007? I'd have to actually think about it. It's been a long time. And we were on holiday in the British Virgin Islands, and we had dinner. That was the funny, we were at a place where you would sort of have dinner in these little groups, and we were with them. So my first was My Dinner with Andre, which of course is iconic film. And we just really hit it off. And I found out, in addition to being, wonderful theater impresario, and his wife Cindy, who also is a brilliant documentary filmmaker, that they both were artists. She does amazing sort of composed photography and sort of collaged images, things that sort of transcend a little bit. You would love it. It would speak to you. And then he, of course, started sort of painting just almost as a, like we're saying, is like a retreat, a mental shift to kind of, he was going through some stressful things. And I think it was like, why don't you take a painting class or something? So he did. And he just became, I think his creative brain just got completely absorbed in it, because it's a different type of creativity, but very similar to what he does in the theater and film world. And, I think he's, the thing I love about him and that I admired about the work is, as someone who's been as wildly successful as he has, and who's achieved, working with the people he's worked with, when it came to being an artist, all he wanted to do was go work, learn from different artists, look at different work. he knew that the way to learning it was experiencing it and seeing how different artists work, and that curiosity. And I think that's one of the things that I seem to be drawn toward in artists, is artists who have that, curiosity, and to have that, in his 80s, to not be like, I've done so much. He still just has this voracious hunger for learning and exposing himself to new ideas.
Appetite for life.
Yeah, and I think it comes out in the work, because the work, and you saw that exhibition that we had. They're that very kind of still life, things around him, very everyday, mundane objects about him, little vestiges of his world, but yet they have this kind of uneasy sort of nerve, kind of the way we all exist in the world. We have our perfect little things all around us, our collections of things that give us meaning, but there's always this kind of growth, and sometimes it's attention, and sometimes it's things we're having to deal with challenges. And I see so much of that in this work, that it's at once beautiful and peaceful, yet it's that uneasiness that every day there's always going to be new challenges, and what are they, and that
there's also that spontaneous quality in his brush stroke.
There are a lot.
And it's so simple, and it's very expressive in its simplicity and its spontaneity.
Yeah, very alive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I really, really liked a lot.
Yeah, and then so that would be, and I loved kind of the way he was exploring the genre in sort of a different way. And then Lauren, well, let's see. So now we'll go back to a photographer. Then there was, I think Maya I kind of relate her a little bit. I tend to like artists, or be drawn to artists, who aren't afraid to use their creative powers in different directions. And she is a brilliant filmmaker, as well as.
Is she really?
Oh gosh, yes, yeah. You and I. I don't want to go into too much detail and bore you, but she does beautiful. And it's almost, they tie, though. They're not like, it's sort of like with Andre. They're separate, but they're not, because it's all very. What she tends to go immerse herself in a particular. I won't say counterculture, like a certain community. Like she went and spent a ton of time with basically prostitutes down in Mexico City, and young, old, because that's the thing. Even when you're a prostitute, you still get old, and you have different phases of your life and different things that come in and out of your life. And so it was this really humanist. And she did both stills from it, and also did a well-regarded film, which I'll lend to you. But what she's doing in this, I think it's this idea of actually embedding herself into this community, where for a moment, sometimes you can't really understand a community until you've spent time in it. And it's not just looking at it from afar. It's actually spending so much time in it that you get to know them. They get to know you. It's embedding yourself in
it from the inside,
daily life, which I think for someone to do that takes a certain bravery, because
absolutely, you have to want to do it.
Yeah, and I think, but I also think it takes a certain like a curiosity to want to know, how do others function, how do these people live, and instead of just saying, prejudging and saying, oh, prostitutes, and but instead, like, look at the humanity of what they're doing and how they ended up here, and they, the feelings they have around it, and the feelings they have around people and each other. So I think her work is, and then that quality of just her images have this somewhat, I see yours like this. There's a profound silence to them. They feel very quiet, yet they are so powerful.
Well, there's a lot of empathy in them.
Yeah, there's, but it's not feeling sorry for, it's
No,
actually,
no, no.
it's giving power to these figures in maybe in their difficult lives, in their difficult situations, in their, because it's this humanizing of what they're going through that isn't like, oh, you poor, it's more like, you powerful person, to be able to, you know, to get up out of, kind of like all of us, to get up out of bed every day and do the things you do. It's giving them this almost larger than life presence, which we all have. And that's what I think she's so profoundly good at. I was able to spend, the last time I saw her before the world fell apart, the last place I went was Mexico City. And my good friend Alan Blevins, who has long been with the cultural programming at Bank of America, is a very dear friend of hers, and he's the one who introduced me a while back to her. And I was able to spend the afternoon with her and Graciela Iturbide, who was her mentor. And I see a lot of that power. I think they're drawn to each other as people because they both share that. They sort of empower these images of things that can otherwise feel kind of just quiet or
So she's
mundane or
Mexican.
disturbing, huh?
She's Mexican.
Yeah, she lives in Mexico City. So basically, she Nelson as well is based out of Mexico City. Nelson is interesting in that he's sort of became, as a photographer, he became very fascinated with the Mucius culture, which, if you think of it, there, if here, say in the States, the concept of being a transvestite might be sort of seen as like being an other in the, sadly, in the larger kind of context of public. Sometimes we don't, there are people who don't always accept it, even though I thank goodness that's growing. There, it's this revered, like if you have a Mucius in your family, you're considered blessed. Like it's this sort of free sense of not having to relate to a certain, having a fluid sexual identity is seen as like a power, not having to be tied to the constraints of man or woman, but to be this sort of creatively fluid sexual being is seen as a very deep spiritual sort of power. So he began to photograph a lot of people within this segment of community, and in doing so, it unlocked his own understanding of his own being, his own relation to his own sexuality, his own humanness, what he equates in his own life. So it really empowered his own existence. And that, so again, it's funny, I'm starting to see all these things as I talk about these people. It's again that looking, opening yourself up to other cultures, communities.
Or was he a photographer before? Or
Yeah, yes, he was a photographer before, but as he began photographing this culture, it became, now he's very part of it. Like it actually opened him to a different level of his own being. But the images are just, I mean, and I think they're set within these kind of, he's a master of sort of finding moment, color, pattern, passion. I think there was one I posted the other day where it's this beautiful Mucius in a flowing, gorgeous printed gown and kind of resting their head upon what looks like sort of a mother figure, a more elderly figure, and all around them there's like these kind of textiles and fabrics. And but again, it's that idea of our daily life and our daily inspiration and those around us, and the power found in being open to what that can be and being open to what that is. So I think the images are at once just profound and gorgeous and voluptuous and incredible, and but yet at the same time there's this power to them of encouraging people to be able to kind of be free in how we see the world, and not, you know, in that moment put on definitions on things and to be more open with just how free the world is.
But
So,
again,
so he,
again, he's photographing it from the inside, just like Maya photographs these women from the inside. So does he, by being
kind of like what you're doing in New York. You photograph New York from the inside,
yes.
and I think you dig into it. You're there's times where you almost feel like it's almost like you're existing in your photographs, but the people around you aren't really seeing you because you're so in your. And that's a hard thing to do, where you're it's like you're documenting this whole, you're not just documenting the physicality of it, you're documenting the energy and the spirituality in it. And I think that's what Maya does, that's what Nelson does, that's what you do. And I think that's a photographer who, that's why I personally don't draw a lot of boundaries between painting, photography, performance. It's all about what energy are you giving me? What are you, and I think in all of those images, you get an immense sense not only of place, but of the emotional and spiritual connection of that moment and existing in that moment, whatever, be it filtered light, be it a human doing a thing they do during the day. That's a power that I don't think you can teach that either. I think that's you're born seeing these things. And
yes, I mean, it's the kind of thing, I always say that, the reality is, to be honest with you, is that I never chase after images. The images come to me.
exactly.
They appear.
They find you.
They appear. And
Yeah.
the trick is to see them.
And that's what I think both Nelson and Maya do so beautifully is,
Yeah.
and a lot of it is putting yourself in
a receptive mode.
In a receptive mood to where it can come to you, and not being, immersing yourself in it fully and giving yourself to it. And I think that if you do that, it's like a painter immersing themselves into a painting. When a painter does that, they create this openness to what will come. And I think it's the same in photography. And Lauren Ball is kind of creating these they almost feel sort of layered landscapey. I wish you could have seen that installation when it was down on the NYU campus. She's brilliant with these very large scale, and they're abstract, but there's these layers and these ways of forming, almost like mental. I see them as almost like mental landscapes to me.
Yeah.
They're very hard to describe, but they're very ethereal, and you find yourself tumbling backwards into the layers of them. And even though that parts of them are extremely two-dimensional and sort of stop you, then there's others where you're sort of getting lost in them. And there's, when you see them, they envelop you, and they make you, look for things that maybe are, redolent of objects, and things you've seen and things in the world. And I think she's, again, taking a lot of the things in her life around her. I think these are very personal to her daily path through life, yet they're very universal because we're all in that. So I think in terms of someone with just pure letting herself be immersed in that moment, and that I think she's profoundly good at that.
And I'm sure that if you asked her how she does it, she may not even be able to tell you, because it just happens.
Yeah, I think it's ingrained within, and there's this, I think, again, there's this freedom to it. I may be drawn to freedom as well, because there's this openness to just letting kind of what flows flow.
Everything seems to be floating, it's floating.
Yeah.
Richness and feeling of floating, and these transparencies. It's really beautiful work.
It is. I mean, and I think she's also looking at things that aren't always so easy in them, in terms of life and experience and form and the paths we're all on. But I think it's that push and pull of kind of negative, positive space and energy that really is it's like recreating what we're all doing, you know, and life is, it's the good, it's the bad, it's the challenging, it's the days that are easy as can be, and in the days that you don't know how you survived it. And I think that's what all of these, again, it's interesting. It's funny when you talk to someone about it, I start to see, I think I have no lines in the artists that are in the program, but a lot of them have that ability to kind of let both aspects of their life exist, the good and the bad, and to look at the things in the world that are challenging and easy and let them both exist, and it's okay. And I think that's something I'm drawn to without realizing it, because I think it's that reality of that we can't create, you know, a painter or an artist or performance artist or photographer. You create a thing, a concept of form, but you can't really make life exactly what you want it to be. So it's all responsive in some way.
Yeah.
And you're creating basically your response.
Yeah, it's the other way around. It's life makes you what it wants.
Exactly. Yeah, especially in New York. New York, you have no.
New York, it happens a lot faster.
Yeah, New York is the quick mode. No, but that's a beautiful way of putting it. That's true. I think that so much of art is responding just to these realities, and to responding to being a human and not fighting it, just responding to it.
Yeah,
because
it's about being open. Yeah, it's about being open to it.
Yeah. And that's why I think being a collector, you open yourself up to kind of responding to your own life, and sometimes, you know, what you're doing and what you're thinking and new ideas. It's brilliant.
But you know, there is some art that good art, I'm talking about good art, there's some art that produces an immediate effect. And then there's other art that's much more slow acting, that grows on you over time.
Mm-hmm. And I think you need both. I
know you need both, but it's interesting to see how those two very distinct areas, where you take to something right away, and the other thing, you walk by it and you don't even notice it sometimes. And then you come back to it and you notice something, and you hang, and then you just stand there for a while and you see something else that it draws you in, but ever so slowly.
That's one of the things I personally love about collecting, is I'll have a piece that I acquired years ago, and I'll be sitting and say I install, or it hasn't been installed, or it's suddenly it's here, or kind of like you move it to a new place, you put it in it, and it kind of takes on a different thing, and you notice things in it, or it makes you question things that maybe you've seen it a million times, but you never really got it. You never picked up on, or you never were in the right frame of mind to register this thing. So I think a good collection will constantly surprise you that way. You'll see something that you thought you knew it all and you didn't. Or someone will come over, and I love to like share art with people, because someone will always say something that you're like, well, I never would have seen that, or I never would have thought that, or it'll trigger something in them that you just didn't, you know, it wasn't maybe your experience, but to watch other people, it's, you know, it's so powerful.
Yeah, but you know, what you just said about people telling you things about a piece of art that you didn't see. It happens to me when people look at my own work and they say, oh, look at it. And I never saw it. So I really strongly believe that in my particular case, but I think it's not uncommon, that in my particular case, when I click the shutter, it's not my eyes that saw it's my entire nervous system. It's the nervous system that sees, and then when you look at it later on, then the eyes also see it, because sometimes it happens so fast.
Yeah. And it's sometimes a combination of things playing off of you.
Yeah.
Like the way, this moment in the day or this time of day with this architecture, with this person, with this happening, with this, is someone, or is this person having an argument with someone? Are they having a loving moment? What are they doing? Are they in a hurry? Are they slow? Like all of these different aspects of that moment are all, and that's why I love that it's more nervous system, because you're not experiencing one thing you're seeing. You're experiencing all of these things.
The nervous system can see a lot more than just the eyes or the ears, all the skin.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one last question.
Oh, this is going to be a good one.
No. Last night on PBS, Elizabeth Warren, the senator, announced a new book. Her new book called Persist.
Oh, I haven't heard this. I'll have to look this up.
So, in her particular case, she ran, for president and she didn't quite make it and so on. You can understand, the title of the book and what might be inside. But the question that I ask myself is that notion of persistence and persisting a familiar notion for those of us in the art world, you in particular? What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And
what would you do if you didn't persist?
Yeah, it's all about, it's the things that keep us going. It's persistence is both. There's an aspect of, one thing I notice in my life is I've always learned more, done more, and come out more powerfully from the challenges than from the easy times. And I think perhaps that's being at a certain age where you start to see that. When you're young, you're sort of like, oh, why are things going wrong? Why is everything not perfect? And then as you get older, you're like, nothing is ever going to be, did I know there would be a pandemic 6-7 months after I opened the gallery? Of course I didn't. No. You don't plan for these things. And
yes, being old is about saying yes to everything.
There have to what?
I think that being older is about saying yes to everything.
It's sometimes to your own detriment, but I think it's just kind of like taking what comes and making the best of it. And to me, it's all just staying. I think persistence, and I'll be curious to read her book, because I adore her path, and I think she's been such a strong female.
And her passion.
Yeah, it's so, and she's so intelligent, yet she's just a profound person. But I imagine this idea of persistence too, I think, is if you have, a lot of it relates to me to creative sort of energies. If you have a vision, like you wake up and you relate to being an artist. It's not something you're choosing for an external reason, for money. It's what feeds you, and it's that vision is my persistence. If I just stay for the artist, for the art, this is how I want to spend my life, this is what I want to do, and this is what makes me feel good when I wake up in the morning and when I go to sleep at night, to feel like I've helped these people, find, even if it was one more person discovered their work today, that's something, and that's powerful. So if, to me, persistence is just never letting yourself feel like the vision isn't serving you, and letting the little things that go wrong, and the pandemics and the this or that or the other get in your way. Just finding new ways to keep it going. And that, I think there's a beautiful you know, and it won't always move in a linear way. It won't always, you're going to, you know, meander in hills and valleys. And, but I think if you just stay on the path, you're in the right place. And that's what's the hardest thing to do sometimes. And, you know, and to not let the voices and the,
Yeah, but it has to do with believing in yourself and believing in what you're doing and
yeah,
knowing that you're at the right place or doing the right thing.
sure.
Yeah, it has a lot to do with wanting something because that's what's right for you, and you have to be immersed in it enough.
Mm-hmm. And be comfortable in who you are and who you feel like you've, you know,
Yeah.
and that's I'm completely you couldn't get more comfortable than and I don't say that in an egotistical way. I'm very, you know, I'm giving to a fault, but at the same time I'm very, you know, I don't, I think it's because I don't do it for, you know, it's not a popularity contest. It's not about, I want people to praise the artists. You know, I want to, you know, if they get something, then that's, you know, that's good for me. And because I feed my soul in very simple ways. Like I love nature, I love running, I love cooking. Like when it comes to my professional sphere, it's just that concept of being, because my whole life I wanted to do something to support artists. I knew I didn't want to be an artist per se, but I wanted to be that curiosity. I wanted to be always discovering it, always, always, always. And this allows me to do that. So it's like a dream. This is what, as when I was a little kid, this I couldn't have dreamed anything better. And it's been that path will, you know, it's just following the path of what lets you do that. So,
You're
and
very lucky that you got to do it.
yeah, and you know, and believe me, it's not easy because there's days where you're just, you know, like the amount that we're doing right now for two people and this and planning shows and we have very high standards too. Um, so it's there's I you know I don't rest as often as I should. I need a spa vacation. Can we talk about that? But I wouldn't have it any differently, you know.
Yes, yes. No, I understand that,
You know,
but
because when I get
yeah,
off the phone with you, I have some stuff to do, and then I've
yeah.
actually agreed to be a juror for the New York Academy, so I get to review many artist submissions and pick like, you know, 50 to 100 in the first round. So this is going to be a busy weekend because then I take that very seriously. That's not
Yeah.
like looking at work like that is intense and it's meaningful. So, but
Well, I'm gonna let you go back to what you were doing before I called.
and the dogs have fallen back
And
asleep.
the call,
There's
the
UPS
dog,
person left.
the contractors, the whole thing.
It's the only day I haven't had a contractor here in a long time. When you like art, you're very particular. They've gotten used to me.
Yes.
I need everything to be a certain. Yeah, and I said you'll understand when the art comes in. That's what I just keep saying. Just you don't get it now, but you'll understand when the art gets here.
So thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
know we'll be talking again soon.
Yes, we're going to MoMA.
And we're going to MoMA, so let me know what day is good for you.
Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll be in. I'll let you know my schedule here, and we'll figure it out.
And thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Always wonderful to speak to you. You're a beautiful, bright being, and I love that. So I'm honored to have you in my life. I'm glad you wandered into that space all that time ago. So have a lovely day. I'll see you soon.
You too. Yes, take care.
Be well.